Yes.
So why don't stockbrokers have to be licensed?
Stockbrokers do need to be licensed under the federal government.
So
The Title 7, Series 7 exam.
So in the last crash, I'm assuming that a lot of stockbrokers lost that license.
You're assuming that. You're assuming. Here's the one I know about. There's a researcher at the University of Minnesota who's looked at foreclosure rates. He's affiliated with the Federal Reserve Bank here in Minneapolis. And what he did is looked at those states that license mortgage brokers versus those that didn't license mortgage brokers. And then he looked at foreclosure rates, bad loans in states that license mortgage brokers and those that didn't license mortgage brokers. And you know the punchline. There's no difference in foreclosure rates between the two states. But if you're a licensed broker in a state where licensing does exist, you get higher fees than in Kansas and other states where licensing doesn't exist.
But Lee, don't you also have to pay for your license?
You do.
So then there's another bureaucracy. I mean, they get to collect off of all these people now more fees.
Yes, Gina, that's exactly right. Now, that's exactly right. You happily write that check for $300 or $400, whatever that license is, every year. So take the role of a barber or a cosmetologist. You go to the barber shop, you go to the beauty salon, you pay an incremental $2, $3. That's not going to stimulate you to go down to St. Paul and say, deregulate the cosmetologists. It's $3 times 4 or 5 times a year. But if you're the barber or if you're the cosmetologist, $3 off of every head, you're definitely going to write the check to the cosmetology board because you're getting a premium of $3, $4 a head. And not only do you write the check to the cosmetology board, you write the check to your trade association who hires the lobbyist who keeps this regulation in place so that, and that makes sense, an extra $100 a year or so in trade association fees, and that certainly makes sense because you have the concentrated benefits of a small group. So let's contrast those for a second. And this is the big theme. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with tonight, is the idea of concentrated, how to look at politics. And one way to look at politics is through the prism of concentrated benefits versus dispersed costs. Why do things happen in St. Paul the way they do? It makes perfect sense for a barber to write that incremental check for $100 to the trade association to hire the lobbyist. And all 10,000 barbers in the state are doing that. They're all contributing their, what's that, $100,000 or so. They're paying for the executive director, the trade association, and they're paying for the lobbyist, and they're making political contributions, and they get $2, $3 off of every head, and it more than pays for itself, the $100. But that money, that $2, $3 a head, is coming out of your pockets. And the other 5 million consumers of hair services in the state of Minnesota, why don't you organize? Why don't you hire a lobbyist? Why don't you demand free markets and more competition for barbers and cosmetologists? Because it doesn't make sense for you You're dispersed all over Minnesota. It only costs you $10, $12, $15 a year. You are rational in not caring about the occupational licensing when you are a consumer, because and it doesn't even make sense for you to start collecting names to send emails to try to organize people, because that's not worth $10, $15 a year. So we have this horrible mismatch of those few who have huge benefits and the many who pay the same amount but in a dispersed cost. They're motivated, you're not.
And it's so easy to sell to a gullible public that the state is looking out to ensure the competency of all of these licensed.
Yes. It is just, you know, when I tell the story about the mortgage brokers, and I have a similar story about dentists as well, the idea that somehow licensing is an ineffective screen for fraud and incompetence just doesn't ring right. We want licensing to work. We want licensing to weed out the frauds and incompetence. What weeds out frauds and incompetence is what you believe in. You believe in markets and competition and telling your neighbor that this cosmetologist is okay, this barber is friendly and cheap. This is what weeds out the incompetence and mostly the frauds, and not some occupational licensing. Yes, sir.
I'm reminded of that whole joke about the person in med school who finishes first in his class and last in his class.
Yes.
In the end, you still call him both doctor.
That's exactly. Gina.
But Lee, isn't it, if you look, we're all, like you said, the public is gullible enough to, when you look in the yellow pages for somebody, you go, oh, he's licensed. And so then it's more of this thinking that they're the better person to hire than the one that doesn't say that.
Now, actually, the yellow pages is a pretty good screen, in the sense of the provider has earned enough money to put an ad in the yellow pages. Much better than are you licensed. The better question is, how long have you been in business? Because if you're putting bread on your table, well, you sort of figured out how to be in business. But much better than licensing is also turning to your neighbor and saying, what doctor do you go to? I need a plumber. I need an electrician. Yes, sir.
Are you sure you're not a marketing guy for Angie's List?
Touche. But that's exactly right. Angie's List is much more potent than a board. In Minnesota, we have this tradition of 9-member boards. 8 of them are licensees.
Right.
One is a public member.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this proportionality? In the legal profession, April and I, in order to lose our license, we must be addicted to heroin or stealing money from trust accounts. Have lawyers ever lost their license for incompetence? I don't, maybe, but it is not. These are, sadly, the lawyers do have problems with drugs and alcohol, and they do have problems with trust accounts, managing money. But it is not, the legal license is not a particularly effective screen for competence. Your neighbor who got a divorce knows good divorce lawyers, or who needed a will, or something like that, or just checking around. Those are important signals.